Good evening to you all, or good afternoon, or good morning, or if you are watching a recording of this chat, Eimear Burke here, and welcome to another Fireside Chat brought to you by the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, and this is our 90th chat. So I will just start with my usual prayer for peace. Forgive me, 2 weeks ago I forgot to say it. So, Gunmara Shiakon fud na crinne, Gunmara Shiakon in our Jaili, agus in our Jirha, Gunairi Lin len our Garmaka, Gaumich Buikas Jeev, Je Chivdaka, a spirit Quivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today. May an unexpected serenity surprise them. For those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain, with thanks to John O'Donoghue. So let me know where you're from. Hi, Elvira from Italy, from Ulster, London, Ferdy from South London, lovely Scotland, London again, Denver, Cardiff, Tampa, lovely, Wisconsin. Just lovely to see you all again, and Belgium. Just really, really nice. Killaloe, Tipperary. So nice to have a few more Irish people. Northamptonshire, Portugal, lovely. That's just great. Dark London. The last time it was sunny London. So Oakland, Maine, Ohio, lovely. St. Austell Bay. I wonder where that is. Eastern Washington Mountains, lovely. Penzance, lovely. Vero Beach, lovely. The Netherlands, good vibes. Thank you very much. And from Germany, hello to everybody. So we have a guest here from our viewer from Ohio, Jamie, but we are going to Ohio this evening, and I'd like to introduce my guest this evening, and it's Srinivas Anand. Srini, you're so welcome to this Fireside Chat.
Hello, Eimear. How are you?
So what time of day is it?
It's about 3 p.m. right now. So,
and your weather?
Not too bad. It's fall. We are coming upon fall now, but it is a warmer day than has been in the recent past.
Okay.
So it isn't too bad. The sun's out, more or less. And so, I don't know if you heard that. That's my cat.
Okay, that's your cat. Cats are welcome here.
Yeah, so she has to sit on my lap anytime I'm at my desk. So she has to do this.
What's her name?
Her name is Freya Louisa.
Freya Louisa. Okay,
yes.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
We called her Freya, but she decided that her name was Freya Louisa, and so that's how she goes by that. So
very good.
Yeah.
So just, I mean, obviously, I know by your accent that you're not from Ohio, but before that, just tell me about what your landscape in Ohio is like, and then we'll go back to where you got your accent.
Okay. So we live in sort of southwestern Ohio, not quite all the way down into the Cincinnati Valley, which is right on the river, a little further up north, maybe by about 50 miles.
Okay.
So we are on the eastern edge of what is called the Midwest of the U.S., not quite the Great Plains anymore, but a little more rocky, a little more undulating plains as opposed to mountainous terrain. So there's a little that. I believe we are at the southern tip of what is the glacial till. So the glaciers came down 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 years ago, and this is around where they stopped before they retreated. So we are in the glacial till plain. It does two things for us. It allows us, this area is extremely fertile. So the soil is extremely good. but it is also rocky. Wherever we dig, we could dig 2 inches and we are certain to hit rock.
Oh,
Um, and rock from the size of my palm to 6 feet long,
okay.
big, big rock. So it is good and bad at the same time. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, but it is very nice. Yeah.
So then you come from India. So,
Mhm.
I mean, I'm sure that's been a very, very interesting journey from where in India are you from, or where's your home place?
I come from the city of Bangalore, which is now a megapolis, I guess, not even just a metropolis. 60 million people,
Wow.
something like that. Um, when I left, it was a sleepy, sleepy town that was just considered a retiree's paradise. I left India 30 years ago.
Okay.
So it's been a while, and there was hardly any of this foreign, companies going out there and doing business. None of that stuff existed. And so when I came, it was just a quiet town, lots of trees, just green as you can imagine.
Lovely.
And greenery is very hard to come by now. I mean, just hardly any trees out there. Um, so it's a massive. It's a very very big city, and I hardly recognize it at all when I go back.
So all this done in 30 years, from
In
green
Turkey.
to concrete. Okay.
So we were one of maybe a few dozen houses on the street, not on a street with hundreds of houses that had a telephone and had a car.
Okay.
Now everybody has one or two cell phones each, and there are multiple cars, and just it's an explosion that is prosperity, and you know the other flip side of prosperity, I guess, consumerism. So
So, what's your background? So, I mean, what was your childhood like, growing up in India? Um,
um very interesting family. From I'll talk about the family, and then I'll talk about other, maybe the spiritual side of things as well. So
yeah.
talk about that. My grandfather had two sons. My dad was the second son, and but my grandfather, my dad, my mom, and my brothers, and my uncle and aunt all lived in the same house always. And so I didn't have just one set of parents. I had
Yeah.
two sets of parents, and my grandfather was a professor of English, so he could recite English poetry without ever looking at a book. He didn't need that. I mean, for years. And so he went blind after some bad operations. And so, but he didn't need books. He could just recite poetry.
Wow.
Uh, Tennyson, Keats, Wordsworth, anybody you name, and he would be able to not just recite them, but also explain the intent behind each of those poems that the author or the poet had. And so that was my upbringing, was sort of in that culture of English. Everything that we did was not everything we did, but a lot of things that we did was English. Conversations were English, and then they might flip to our native tongues when necessary. Everybody in my family speaks, writes English, and that's the primary mode of communication.
Wow.
And so we have an interesting thing in that I would do what is called code switching. So we might be speaking in our native tongue, where we would insert English words,
Yes.
flip to an English sentence, and then flip back
Yeah.
to the next one. And we've had conversations here at home, and the idea is that certain sentences are best expressed in a certain language,
That's right. Yes.
right? And I have that advantage of having multiple languages, or certain words express a emotion
Yeah.
just right, and then you flip to that one.
It just strikes me your grandfather would have done very, very well as a druid hundreds and hundreds of years ago, which, was all about learning off, like nothing was committed to paper. And
Mhm.
to be able to recite, all these oghams and various stanzas and poems and stories and everything. I think he'd have done very, very well here.
Yeah, I would imagine so. The other aspect, which is interesting that you mentioned this way, which I had not thought about at all. Um, so I grew up in a very Hindu, in a Hindu family,
Yeah.
a very Hindu centric society, predominantly Hindu, with a smattering of other religions. We're a multi-religion nation, and that is simply accepted by society and the constitution and everything in there. So that is never a concern there. But my grandfather was never one to force any specific religion. He was actually not quite an atheist, but not. Um, he believed in whatever you needed to believe. It had to have a light touch.
Okay.
And so we would have all the Hindu ceremonies, and then Christmas would come around, and the true Christmas tree was not one readily available, but we would find a branch from a tree somewhere
Yeah.
that have sort of the shape of it, and have a Christmas. It was more the spirit of it than the religious aspect of Christmas. We had images of the Buddha around, and a painting and a print of the Last Supper at home
Okay.
that occupied a place of pride in the living room. So nothing was out of the ordinary there in our household. So it was very when you think through that, it's already like, oh, every possible religion, faith, spirituality is acceptable. You're not stopped from pursuing anything that you wanted. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was interesting. I don't know that I had actually thought through that particular aspect of it until we started talking now. So
Sounds like OBOD.
it does.
When we have so many people from so many spiritual traditions as members and it's just there. That's really
Yeah,
interesting.
which is just so enriching,
Mhm.
right? So now I think of myself, and I have to quickly add on that we as a family here think of ourselves as Hindruids. Uh, some of you in the group may know my partner Lom. She and I are both Hindruids in that we have blended and continue to blend the two spiritual paths. And quite successfully, and we are continuing to do that more and more. How do we bring the two of them together, because they are just so similar?
So I'm going to come back to that again because that's really, really interesting. Is what brought you to the US then from India like 30 years ago?
So my background in education is in computer science, sort of software engineering, programming, that kind of stuff. So I had a bachelor's in India, and everybody in my class was going to the US back in the 90s, and everybody who preceded me in the preceding years did the same, and so did I. It was almost as though there was not a conversation, and this was the only path forward.
Okay.
My mother comes from a large family, and she had a number of her siblings living in the U.S. from coast to coast. So there was a little bit of a support structure built in, right? So that's all. I sort of just naturally came to the U.S. And I have lived here ever since. So.
And what brought you to Druidry, or how did you find Druidry? Given that you had your Hinduism and still do,
Mhm.
what was that pathway into Druidry and in the order?
So it is important. I'll touch upon one point that you made that was very important. That I am still a Hindu, and
Yeah.
I'm still a Druid at the same time. I have not quite abandoned any pathway. I have to. Lom was my pathway to Druidry. So when we met, we talked about faith and other things, and she said that she is in a pagan, earth-based. She didn't say pagan. I believe she said an earth-based spiritual path and believes in. So we live in a very conservative part of the country, and so one approaches these topics with caution and couches. You would couch the words in
That's
carefully.
right. Yes.
Uh, as what I am today. So she talked about how she was really in an earth based, and I said, "Oh, you're a pagan," and she said, "Oh, yes." And then she invited me to, I think, Yule for the first time within a month of having met her.
Okay.
And I went to Yule, and I was like, "Oh, this is interesting and not scary by any stretch of the imagination." And so we kept talking, and she would tell me she wasn't a druid at that time. She was not part of OBOD at that time. She was just following different
Mhm.
pagan like paths. And she would explain to me how the pagan path had all these different deities and they would have all these practices. And I would say, wait, that's what we do in Hinduism. Wait, we do have multiple deities in Hinduism. Oh, wait, there are gods and goddesses. There are, and so you start talking about, um, if you were to think about, I mean, not this may not be the right thing, but if you think of Odin and the representation with an association with the crow or the raven there, right? So it is like, oh, Hindu gods have mounts which are typically animals of some kind, and it's just one with the raven, and
Yes.
it's like, so the similarities are just incredible. And so when you keep talking about it, everything seemed the same, or not quite the same, but very similar pathways. And so we just kept talking, and then once we decided we are going to get married, which is a whole journey that we can talk about as well.
Let's do.
um, we decided we would have three ceremonies: one pagan, one Hindu, and one non-denominational.
Okay. Why? I'm curious. I can understand the Hindu and the pagan. Why the non-denominational? Was that the civil one?
Yeah, that was a civil one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it came in a different way in that we were going to have a US wedding and an India wedding. And so people in the US could attend one and the people in India could attend the other. And we decided that so it would be unfair for someone to have been able to attend all of them and not the other. So we said we had a mildly secret civil ceremony. And but so nobody was invited except for two people who were our witnesses.
Yes.
So that was, I proposed to her in June of that year, and we decided that we are going to have our civil ceremony on equinox, September
Don't
22nd.
rush these things.
Huh?
Always take. Don't rush these things. Go on. So you met in June. You proposed in.
I proposed. No. I met her in the previous year, November, and I proposed to her in June.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
And
I
then.
waited 6 months, and
I
I
love
did.
it.
Yeah, and we decided that we were going to get married that year to begin with, and so we said, let's get married on equinox.
Lovely.
And so we had um, I don't know if he was a minister of peace or he was actually, I think he was actually a judge who does administer weddings as well. He agreed to come to our house, and so we had the ceremony right at noon. So we would be married as equals on he did not know that we were doing this, and it was all said. And so when we told him after the fact, he was like, oh, that was very interesting. And so we just had everything written down so we could do this. So we got married at noon on equinox, and so that was yeah, so that was, we tried to have the next one, I think, around Imolc. For one, it is extremely cold. Two, Lom's family comes from a farming background, and they had cattle, and so that's true calving season. So
Oh, okay.
you can't give up. There's not a day there that you really can give up
Yeah.
to other things, and so we couldn't do that. So we pushed it to May. We got married when we had a pagan ceremony.
Happy Altana. Yeah.
Hmm. And then we got married in India in June. Which is, so really, so we brought this circle around, not quite doing it every quarter, but getting it close to that time frame. So that worked out quite well. So the
Wonderful. How many years ago was that?
10 years this year.
Oh, okay, great.
10 years. The equinox wedding was 10 years ago this year.
Lovely. Happy
Yeah.
anniversary.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, just a couple of weeks ago that we did that.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a very it was very interesting to have both of those ceremonies. And so my mom came to the US one, and her mom one was able to come to the Indian one, and so we had the exchange of parents
Lovely.
to the two ceremonies. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
Yeah.
Sounds absolutely wonderful. So, what brought you to, so how did you find OBOD and Druidry? I mean, you said you met Loam, you weren't calling it Druidry, or so what brought you to?
So we haven't gotten there yet, have we? No. So that was still, we were still doing our own thing, and we would sometimes, she would mostly do her own ceremonies by herself. I really was not participating at that. I had nothing against it, just was not anything that I was attracted to at that point in time. And we would just do our own things and would continue on. And then she found, we weren't in Ohio at the time. We moved to Ohio, and she discovered this organization called OBOD and decided to go to a gathering there when we moved here. And she went to that gathering, came back, and just was, the energy level was just through the roof. She couldn't stop talking about it. She couldn't stop talking about the people, the things they did. They had, I think it was either that one or the next one, where they had a whole ceremony on how to save the hemlocks, and they did, there was all these rituals that they did because the eastern hemlocks in the US are an endangered species. They are being attacked by
describe what I know. What my notion of hemlock, you're talking about a tree. You're not talking about
not the poison hemlock.
So explain to our viewers what the hemlocks are.
Okay, so a hemlock is a conifer similar to a pine tree, and they're all sort of related in sort of at the higher level. So it is sort of a conifer and has cones, and it produces. There are two types of hemlock, at least in the United States. One on the eastern side and one in Canada, slightly different ones. They are they can be big trees. They can be really big trees, but they are being attacked, especially in the southeastern part of the United States, by these tiny bugs that are just probably 1 to 2 millimeters in size. That's it. That's tiny, and they are being attacked, and whole forests are being decimated. Yeah. And so I think they were sending out good energies from one forest to another, and things like that. And so, but it was just that level of energy was just super high. This was 2016. Yeah, that was 2016. And then 2017, she went to another gathering, I think, or so, somewhere in that order. She went to another gathering, and then she was again high energy, like this is the way. And she decided that she had wanted, somewhere in that time frame, she joined OBOD.
Okay.
So I've got my years a little mixed up, so I don't really know exactly.
Don't worry.
Yeah. So then she said, well, do you want to go to the next one? And you could come in as a guest and just see what Druidry is all about, and it would be fun. And they have this chief of the order coming, and so that could be fun. And I looked this person up, and Philip's picture shows up, and whatnot. And I said, okay, well, fine, we'll go. And what's the worst thing that'll happen? I'll just be bored. And it'll be a vacation for me. I'll just be bored, and if it gets to be too much, I'll go to a nearby town and spend some time there. So we get there, and it's a large campground and I think like a kids come to camping and whatnot there. And so it's sort of that kind of dorms and whatnot. And so we got down, we got everything settled down, and we set up things, and we were doing everything. And I went to a couple of events that workshops that people had. Interesting enough, but I was also reading this book called Braiding Sweetgrass.
Yes.
You know of it?
Yeah, I've read it. Yes.
You've read it.
What do you call Robin?
Robin Wall Kimmerer.
Yeah.
So I would read that book just sitting somewhere under a tree on the, by the fire pit or by just anywhere. And people would walk by and would be like, oh, I've read that book. Oh, I'm reading it now. Oh, I want to read it. All that is interesting because I had brought that up with some people at work. And they looked at me like, why do I care about this book? So I came from a world that was completely oblivious and really just not interested in that kind of a book, to a world that was just completely immersed in that sort of idea of it. And I began to think, oh wow, these are people who are thinking similar to me, are at least have the same interests. There are other people in the world who have similar interests to me. And then Philip had one of his talks and workshops, and where he talked about everybody needs to be involved and included. Nobody can be excluded. And you're sitting and listening to somebody who's the chief of an order that I'm not familiar with, and now I begin to sit up and like, oh, this got a little more interesting. And then you see people around, tears streaming down their eyes because they're looking at sort of this equality and inclusion and everything, and you look at that going, this is something different. This is inclusion. So I want us to be clear, right? This is all at a social level. This is at a societal level, not at a spiritual level. Then I made a number of friends there, and it was just fun to just be part of everything. I stayed fod, and we just, it was fun. Everybody singing, and and it was all good. And we got done 3 days, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it was. And the very last day was a breakfast, and everybody would head out from there for that. We had breakfast, and Philip comes sit at my table, and he starts talking to us. It's like, well, you should consider joining OBOD, and you should consider identifying the similarities between Hinduism and Druidry. And I myself have studied Buddhism and Jainism and the Dharmic religions, and they're so similar, and you should do this. And what is that? There is one mention of an organization in the UK that does one tree
gathering. Yeah.
One tree gathering, right. I think that's the one that's on the Druidry website as well.
That's right. So every year, I don't know about this year, but they went online with COVID, but where Hindus and OBOD members come together and have a day or two or a weekend on various themes and having ceremonies. I have never gone to a physical one. I've never been able to.
Oh, okay.
And I've been online and been involved in the online one, but I would look forward to, if they do go physical again, to
right. Yeah. So this was more confirmation, more sort of like, oh, there is a lot more to it than just meets the eye. That might be just sort of spinning around in my head. And but I was doing a master's at that time, and I didn't have the headspace for one more thing.
Yeah.
Then I went to another event called Magus, and then you meet the same people who were in the previous events coming out there, and it's now like long lost friends, even though I've just met them one time a year before or 2 days, and it's still the bond is so deep. And then I think in 2019 I was in a good state where I kept thinking about this, and I said, well, no, I am going to become a member. It's not going to be just a pastime. It's going to be a path that I want to be on, and I want to get involved in that. And then we can do the ceremonies that are with full involvement. But we have been doing the ceremonies even before. I've been involved in, at least at home when we do them. we have been doing them, and you're very engaged in that process. So that's how I got immersed into this spiritual path as well. I don't find myself ever wanting to necessarily leave Hinduism behind. I find myself bringing both of them together forward, and how can one influence the other, and how do you? I think that's just enriching.
Absolutely. So I'm interested in how you bring them together, and I'm also interested in differences. Maybe start with, okay, so I'm not sure which one you want to deal with first, and an interview or in a conversation. But I'm interested in, and it's not about comparison, one is better than, but are there times when Druidry is more supportive or more relevant than Hinduism, or Hinduism has more relevance? And that's one. So that's what I'm interested in those. But I'm also interested, maybe to start with, where they meet for you.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're both Hindus now. She comes from the pagan background, you come from a Hindu background, and now you've come together and worked out some kind of synthesis of the two. So I'm interested in how you do that now, or what does that look like for you in terms of your practice?
Yeah. It is not. It is. They both exist. They both, from a ritual practice perspective, they do lie in parallel. They are not blended 100%. Um, we do bring in some Hindu prayers and into our OBOD, into our druidic rituals. We blend them in. So when we'll talk about the Beltane ritual, we'll have to talk about that separately, but I'll just simply say this now. We brought in a prayer for the bee goddess into the Beltane, and we'll talk about why later.
The bee goddess.
The bee.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The honeybee.
Yeah. Okay. Lovely.
Right. And so then there was another one, maybe Imok. Maybe it was Imok. We brought in a prayer to the sun god. I was doing that. I was doing one of the prayers. This was completely unintentional. We were doing, I think, Lunasa, and I said, I have to say this prayer, and I said another prayer. I just had to at that moment. It was just impromptu. It happened.
Are these prayers in Sanskrit? Are they in Hindi or in English? Did you translate? Sanskrit. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any now you'd like to recite?
Not yet, but maybe.
Okay, good.
Maybe with the Beltane one. I do want to talk about the Beltane one. There is a specific reason I want to bring that up with you. So.
Anyway, carry on.
There might be other ways we'll bring that in. We'll bring that in for sure.
Okay.
So then, but the Hindu rituals are interesting. We did bring in Istedfar. I do only one Hindu ritual in the year because that's the only one that I really relate to. It is the birth of Lord Krishna. That is the only one that I am truly drawn to, and he is the only Hindu deity that I am truly drawn to, for reasons that I simply don't know why. But I am. And in that one of the years that we did this, we brought other people in, and we asked them to bring songs and poems and even just write-ups that they might find around about Krishna, and we had a nice tent fund. These were all people who were two of them were Hindus, and the other people were of the Jewish faith, and so it was a
lovely.
Yeah, so you bring in people of all different faiths to do one Hindu ceremony, but you bring in other traditions into it.
What time of year? What time of year is this?
That was in early September.
Okay, so it doesn't correspond with the Wheel of the Year or anything like that. Okay, go on.
I have to get into that. I am trying to make mental space to map the Hindu festivals onto the Wheel of the Year and ask the question, why? right? So January 15th, for example, is a harvest festival.
Okay.
So it is understandable. So it would be the equivalent of Imbolc, but we must also understand like southern India is Bangalore, I think, is like 12 degrees north latitude. So you are butting up against the equator there, as opposed to somewhere up here where we are in the the 40s latitude,
Yeah.
right? So we are much our harvest and our starting of anything is going to be way later. So just timing may not be precise, but I think the intent is. Um, I don't know why Hindu ceremonies are conducted when they are. I just don't know that. And which brings me to a completely different topic of the differences, sort of the similarities and the differences that I thought we could talk about. Um, to me, Hinduism brings both of Hinduism and Druidry sort of bring a strong foundation. They bring very strong foundations for me. Uh, Hinduism is based on really sort of bettering oneself through birth, death, rebirth, reincarnation, and so on, to become better and better as best as we can, and to so you are grounded in that particular reality of the better you become, the quicker and faster you get, uh, you know, immersed with God or the being Atman or the Brahman, really, into one. And so that is the fundamental, that is the foundation. And for that to happen, you have to be good to everybody. You have to be good to everything around you, right? And so it is the same thing. When you think about it from a Druidry perspective, we're we are expected to be good to everybody, like your peace prayer just right
Yeah.
now. Right? You want to be good, and so those are the foundations of the two things, right? But Hinduism has morphed in its practice over the centuries, where it is, and I've been thinking about the right word for this for a while, it is like highly ritualistic, to the point where the reason for the ritual is not very well known.
Okay.
So you just do something and you hope that that is the right thing, that everybody does it, that is what you have been told to do, that is what you have been handed down generationally to do, and that's what you do. It is not grounded in the idea of, let's say we cast a circle to do our rituals in Druidry. We cast a circle in order to bring the energy inside and to keep evil thoughts and spirits and energies outside. So there's a reason for that. It's not scientific. I'm not talking about a scientific reason. I'm just talking about
Yeah.
the reason behind it,
Creating a sacred space, a container for the ritual. Yeah.
right? Whereas what we do in the Hindu rituals, I don't necessarily know why we do it. Why do you do any of them? So the one must separate the foundations of the religions and the spiritual paths, which are both I find very attractive, from the framework or the practice, the daily practice of it. I do struggle with the Hindu practice. It is not, again, I want to be careful that it's not I'm not asking for the scientific proof. Just asking for, why do I want to do a prayer the way it is? Why can I not pray to God at any given time of day? There are people who will tell me, oh, you can't do that now at this time of day.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's like, why not? I should be able to pray to a God or anybody any time of day or night. That should be my will. And I think I also have a problem with authority being told you can't or cannot do something.
It's interesting about time because, this thing you can't say, you must say a prayer at this time, not at that time. And that's assuming time is linear. And there's that notion of all time is now. And I know for healing, I've done it with sending distant healing to somebody who can't receive it now. And I say, okay, this is the healing I'm sending, but it's going to arrive at 5 p.m.
Right.
And it can, so that I'm doing it now, but energetically it happens at 5 p.m. I'm just interested. I would have thought that Hinduism would be much more fluid, but I'm really intrigued by this.
When we begin to get into the script, when you begin to get into the prayers and the scriptures, and I'm not fluent with scripture at all.
Yeah.
But some of the prayers that I've heard, I begin to wonder, like, why did somebody come up with the rule that you cannot pray to God at any time? So there is a prayer that, for example, and it says, I'll just say it. It's in my native tongue. It's not in Sanskrit. Hagalu iralu smarane mareyadante koruniso. So hagalu iralu, day or night, let me remember you, God.
Mm-hmm.
Bless me to remember you. Bless me to think of you. Bless me to worship you. So right there is a prayer that says day or night. I've had relatives tell me you can't say a prayer, this prayer at night or some prayer at night. So I'm like, well, what
Is it
about this
important?
one?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, which is why I say the practice has been modeled, has been sort of codified to a point where no one knows why they're doing it. And you begin to think about these questions, and then which is, um, whereas when you look at all the druidry real practices that we have, they seem practical and in so that is the conflict in my mind. Now, how do I take that practice that I'm sort of learning and in getting inculcated in with druidry into the Hindu practice? How can I do that? What would it mean to draw, the call in the 4 quarters for a Hindu practice? Who would come when the quarters are called in a Hindu practice? Certainly not a salmon, and certainly not. I mean, like, those are not relevant at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is how I do struggle with it. There is a part of me that is also about not letting go of my cultural past. But there is also the draw to, I can hear a certain prayer to Lord Krishna and almost burst into tears because it is so moving. And it could just be a few words. So it isn't just a cultural thing, it is a
No,
deep, profound.
it's in your blood.
And it is a connection to the spirit, to God, to a higher being. And I don't think I can ever let that go. Just
No, and it's just there's a question here from David. I've read that Hindu festivals are based on the lunar calendar. I know we're coming into
Mhm.
Diwali, aren't we now?
I'm sorry.
Diwali, is that coming now this
Yes,
weekend? This week?
Diwali is coming in the near future. Is all I can say.
I was invited to something this weekend and I can't go to
Oh,
prayers in the temple in Dublin, and I can't go, unfortunately. But anyway, sorry, that was so. I've read that Hindu festivals are based on the lunar calendar rather than the solar calendar. Is there a moon goddess in Hinduism? And if so, what can you tell us of her?
very little. Unfortunately, very little. The moon it is based on the moon lunar calendar. That is for certain. Um, who would be the lunar goddess? But lunar goddess is not. I don't. Sorry, the moon goddess. I think of the moon as a god. Chandra is the moon god, as opposed to Surya, who is the sun god. So,
Okay.
if I were to think of a goddess, the goddess may not necessarily be truly Hindu, but Tara would be the closest moon goddess, I think, but she is more Buddhist related than is Hindu related.
Okay.
So I don't believe I know any moon goddess, which is so interesting. You would think of that as the feminine energy, and I don't believe that. I see that way at all. There are goddesses, but not a moon goddess that I can think of.
Okay. Interesting. Lily says Brahmari Devi is the Hindu goddess of bees. In ancient
Mhm.
texts, the humming of bees represented the essential sound of the universe. Goes well with Druidry.
Yes,
Yes.
that
And
is
yes.
yes. So that is the prayer that we did, and I don't have the translation for it. I meant to bring that with me, but I did not bring the translation with me. Um, this comes as two lines in a very long prayer. I know bits and pieces of it here and there for goddess Kali, and a manifestation of goddess Kali. And so, and Lom was talking about this, and I said, "Oh, I know what this is." And she brought up the idea of Brahmara Devi, and I said, "Oh, I know the chant for that," and it just popped in my head, and so we use that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Kali is the goddess of, I mean, people often say here that the Kalyak is similar to Kali or similar energies. Would you agree? And like we're coming up to Samhain where
Yeah.
we honor the Kalyak.
Uh-huh. So Kali is sort of a strong energy goddess. She is in some ways also she represents sort of death. She represents death, of war and death, and that sort of that
Okay.
personality. Also in that for sure, right? The Kaliak is different, right? As
Yeah.
well, she does represent the fallow part of the year. Um, um, Not quite so much, but so why does Durga Puja, Kali, Durga are similar names of the same goddess, I believe. And Durga Puja happened this weekend, or it ends, I think, yes, it ended yesterday. So that would have been the 1st of October to the 5th, would have been her time.
Okay.
So exactly that particular thing, we have to talk about caste and other things in order for me to get to that point. There is a reason. My family would not worship Kali.
Okay.
It This is again one of those why not, and I don't know situations. So when we come to the caste system, there are four castes, and I am so the top. I'll simply say it, and I don't mean it this way, but there is supposed to be the Brahmin class, who is the learned class, and then the other ones, right? I mean, the warrior and the merchant, and then the people who do the other undesirable activities, I guess. Um, so the Brahmin class worships only a certain sect of gods, right? And so I belong to the Brahmin class, and so we don't worship Kali. And my mom would never go to a Kali temple.
Okay.
Never would. Just, but she wouldn't prevent me from doing that. But she just would not. That's just her upbringing, and that's just the way that life is with her, right? And so my exposure to Kali is minimal at best. Um, Now, we do have other prayers that we do say. There are temples that I've been to that one time or twice that there is a manifestation, an avatar of Kali that I have visited. I do know prayers to her in a different form. I do say it, but I say it for myself. I don't ask anybody to join me or uh, tell me one thing or the other. So that is it is interesting. This is why I say that the rules of engagement in Hinduism are complex and complicated and unknown anymore, which doesn't help me do what I want to do. So
Okay. So you would imagine that those from the warrior class would go to Kali temples if she's the goddess of war. So
mhm,
I wonder, are these deities based on the relevance to your life or
possibly.
going back from time?
Yeah, there are many people who will worship um, gods who are really really based on just animal life, like snakes and those things, right? So people will think of Lord Ganesh, who has the elephant head on him, but
Yes.
he is a very separate class of gods who are not truly animal gods. And so but there are others who worship truly animals, and and do that as well. Um, yeah, but in our household we worshipped a broad variety of gods, but just not all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is some demarcation that just doesn't, you don't just cross that line, and I don't know what that line is. So
Interesting. Gabriela says, my understanding from reading about Kali is she's somewhat similar to Pele, the Hawaiian goddess, death and rebirth, cutting through or cutting out what no longer serves us in a very direct way. And she also says, and those that pray to her must be ready for their lives to take harsh, overwhelming turns as she acts directly and abruptly. So just that connection with the Kaliak. So coming up to Samhain, the Kaliak in the landscape just cuts through everything we no longer need, wiping the leaves from the trees, beating them into the ground. And then, that notion coming in the ceremony with her cauldron, we put into the cauldron what we no longer need, and she clears that away. Except she's not. She seems to be like a goddess of destruction, but as in just breaking down what's no longer needed rather than coming in as a war goddess.
But it has been manifested into destruction.
Yes.
So when we think of that, the triumvirate of the male triumvirate, right, which is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Shiva is considered the god of death, right? But he is supposed to come in and drain death and destruction on everything, right? But he is also, that is such a black and white, I'm going to put you in a box sort of manifestation of that. It's just, to me, feels so wrong. Every one of them has their own aspects of life, birth, life, and death, and preservation and everything. So like you said about the Kaliak, really, it's not about destruction at that point. It's about putting down things that are no longer relevant at this point in time of the year. So, which is interesting. I don't connect almost any sort of the Celtic or any other deities. I just can't find myself doing it. But I feel a draw to the Kaliak.
Okay.
To me, of all the rituals that we perform, Samhain is the most important.
Okay.
And it is the one that I really just look forward to. And it's not about, there's no morbidity, there's nothing in there, but it's just that I look forward to it like over the months. Like,
so what is it? What is it particularly for you about Samhain? I know for most people, that's usually the last question I ask, so I won't ask you. And at the end, I'll ask you now. What makes it for you? Why Samhain?
It has evolved over the years. As we have done the rituals, it has evolved over the years, and I am still trying to understand what it means for me. It is most certainly about death, but also about ancestors. I have always been attracted to the idea of my ancestors. I built a family tree 35 years ago or more. I come from a large family, and so I built one. And so that is just sort of a paper copy of things, right? But as we have done our Samhain rituals, and even before I became, really involved in OBOD, we have been doing Samhain. And over the years, I have learned to walk. We have a ceremony where we do a meditation. You get enough time to do your own meditation, and the other person just waits patiently on the side. I have walked past the veil many times as I do the meditation. I think, and this is my personal experience, in that I may have met the Kaliak in past that veil, gone past the veil. I remember doing it the first time and just so scared of where I was going. I remember distinctly a pathway lined with stones, and this woman, old woman, saying, "No, there isn't anything to be scared of. Come." And I approached this stone altar, the stone standing and a stone on top, and she was there. I really couldn't tell what she looked like, but there was a woman presence, an older woman presence, an older woman energy, and we talked a little bit. And when I came back, on the way back, I remember seeing all my ancestors, not just the ones I knew. So they were arrayed behind me, Like imagine an army stretching infinitely to the behind you and infinitely all the way in the back. I came back out of the meditation, and I went, what happened? Who were these people? How did I get to connect with them? And that was the very first year that I did that.
Wow.
And I have had so many connections back again and again and again with my ancestors. Um, and I see them. Seeing is such a strange word because they're seeing yet without the seeing, and hearing without the hearing. And it is that there isn't a space. So it is very interesting. So last year we moved to this place and we did this ritual for the first time in the woods. We have woods. I didn't tell you that.
Oh, lovely.
Well, we moved to this place which is about 5 acres, and I'll tell you about that. And so we did this in the woods, and we typically light candles for those who have passed in the past year. We name them and light a candle, and we light a candle for those who were born in the year past, since the previous Sawan. So I was ready for the meditation, and I went in and I got into my space and I was meditating, and I walked in, and I was immediately confronted by my ancestors. Confronted, not greeted.
Okay, go on.
And they said, you have forgotten us, about us. And I have been not in the greatest of mental spaces for the last year or so. It's just things that are, work related, other things that are going on. Just, uh, man, I have been up here, not down here.
Yeah.
And and I was not expecting that. I'm in there and I'm expecting a warm welcome, and and what this conversation, and that was they were taking me to task, and they were. So this was interesting, and that happened, and they disappeared, and then I turned, and the Kaliak was there, whatever there is again, and I distinctly remember her saying, "I don't have anything else to tell you. You got what you needed to get out of this thing. You need to listen to them, not me this time."
Wow.
And I was I'm just left standing. I don't know what else to do at that point. And I'll tell you, one last thing that happened was I had this thing. Remember, it's from this direction. This baby came to me and said, "You forgot about me." And I said, "No, yes, but you're not forgotten." And that's one of the things I try to do, is to remember, right? So I came out of the ritual, out of my meditation, and I told Lom, "Hey, we forgot about baby." And I named the baby. And she said, "Oh, yes, we did." And so we lit a candle. So in that time, in the months prior, some of our dear friends had lost the baby.
Okay.
It was unborn. And I saw that. I think I knew that it was a baby girl, and I saw that in my meditation as a baby girl. So I don't think it was not like I discovered that it was a baby girl.
Okay.
But then I wrote to this person and I explained what I saw, and they were really touched and moved by that. And so that is why I think of Sawan. I think of it as it is not just a ritual. It is deep connection to my ancestry. And I think so even when I was out in the UK where we met in Glastonbury, I was part of the ceremony at Stonehenge, and so I made a point of going to the northwest stone that is inside, and it actually has a little indentation on it on the right side. I remember that, and it looks like a little sun there, and I put my hand up to it, and I had a little poem that I brought with me that I recited in that poem. But as I put my hand up there, it felt as though that little indentation was glowing with light
Wow.
to me. So all of that tells me I have a connection in that sphere of something, right? Um, what does the other realm hold for me? I don't know yet. I don't know, but that is the direction that I am so attracted. Attracted is such a strong word. It doesn't fit right, but that is what I'm drawn to.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and that's what I want to explore more and more of, more than anything else. Um,
And within your within Hinduism, how much do you have rituals around ancestors?
um, Death is, first of all, sort of a taboo subject. We don't talk
Oh,
about it, first of all. But when someone dies, there is 13 days of ritual.
mhm.
And then there are rituals that happen on the anniversary of that person's passing. So it isn't one day of the year, like uh, the people of Hispanic or Spanish descent would have, the Day of the Dead. We don't have that. It is every individual gets their own day, and their
Yeah.
children are expected to do the ceremonies on that day. I have never done any of that. Um,
Okay.
I have never done that specifically ever for anyone. Um, it's because maybe I just don't remember. I just
Yeah.
don't know the rituals well enough to do them. You typically get a priest to do the rituals, and you sit there and you do what they tell you to do, and so that doesn't.
Okay.
I don't get anything out of it. It's um, so it's when my dad died, we had this priest come and he was talking to us, and we were telling him about all the rituals we wanted to do. And he said, well, the reality is you can do all the rituals you want, but that is only for your own satisfaction. Your dad's going to heaven or not going to heaven based on what he did. His own deeds are going to carry him forward. So here you are trying to do the best thing that you can, and you're hearing that nothing that you're going to do is of any use whatsoever, doesn't ring well, and it doesn't sit well with you. uh, but when you think about it, if all my sins could be absolved by my children doing rituals, why do I need to be good?
It's an interesting one because there are many traditions where, death rituals and funerary rites are really, really important to help the soul move to where it needs to go. And
Mhm.
many people, who haven't been able to carry out the appropriate cultural death rituals by virtue of war or displacement or something,
Mhm.
are left with a lot of pain around that notion
Mhm.
that their loved one will be lost in some space and not be able to go because they needed help from those on
Right.
this side to be able to do it. So it's an interesting one.
It is. I mean, when you think about any ancient culture for that matter, the Egyptians, they would line the sarcophagus with all the things that they would need on their journey to the other side. So um, not exactly the transition to heaven or not, but similarly, you needed earthly help to get to the other realms. It's not unknown, and I'm not dissing anybody, but it was an interesting thought.
I wonder if I mean, obviously, and it's the same in Druidry, we are responsible for our own behavior, and
Hmm.
um, we can't be blaming anybody else. Like, I was obeying orders, or the devil made me do it, or so and so made me do
Right.
it. And even in the worst, it's like, not that we do that, but if you meet, in a meditation, and whoever you meet tells you to do something crazy, it's like, no, you have to use
Judgment.
your own judgment to say, well, actually, if you were, it's never happened to me that I ever had
Right.
anyone instruct me to do something that was against my own values. But if it did, it's like, it's still up to me. And yet there's something around, and we do funerals, well,
Mhm.
my husband, when he died, we had discussed his funeral, and it was a Druidic ceremony in our grove, just in my garden.
Ooh.
But and we've had a tradition of waking people, so there's a vigil for or whatever with the body, and people tell stories about the loved one, etc., etc. Or even that notion that when somebody's passed, that you still talk to them because they can still hear you, and that, in a sense, okay, their journey is their journey, wherever they're going. I mean, if you're a Christian, you might go to purgatory until you've absolved your sins, or you go to hell or heaven, and obviously that isn't our way.
Right.
But that you're wishing them well, that notion of you are sending them off, rather than you're not doing the work for them, but you're wishing them well.
Right. There is a difference between that.
And doing something, it's like, how would you like your death celebrated?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like this. I want this reading, that poem, so and so to carry my coffin, or whatever it is. Or I want to remain, or I want to be buried, and carry out those wishes as a last gift for them.
Right.
Last thing you can do, because I know when Howard died, my sister with me, the whole family were with us. Then my coach, she was a member of the order, and my sister, and my sister is also a nurse, so we came out, and that was really important for me to do that. And then I put him in the coffin, put the lid on the coffin, and that was like and I didn't lower the coffin into the grave, but I made sure I was there seeing him home. That was really, really important. I know he'd gone. I mean, his spirit, but that notion of sending them off and just doing the last thing you can on the physical side, which I found really, really helpful. Now, Owen the Varduna, he's a member of the order, and he comes from a traveller tradition. He says, this has been so interesting. We too have practices for the dead as they journey, and much responsibility rests with those who rest. However, those who have passed hunger, thirsty, or alone do get specific attention, as that comes with more of a shared care and community and responsibility. Now, that is interesting. I just want to put that up on the screen to see if I can read that again.
I've had a little difficulty following.
This has been we too have practices for the dead as they journey, and much responsibility rests with those. I don't know, do you mean those who've passed on, or those who stayed behind, or remain? Maybe, I think you mean that. However, those who've passed, hunger, thirsty, or alone, do get special attention, as that comes with more of a shared care and community responsibility.
Yes. So I wonder if we are talking about the people who have lost somebody, that the community shares in the responsibility of getting them specific attention. I wonder if that is where they are going.
He means he's just corrected now. It's those who remain. The responsibility rests with those. However, those who've passed, hungry, thirsty, or alone, do get. Okay, so somebody has died and say found by the wayside, or found dead someplace. They died alone, or they died of hunger. They were hungry and thirsty. They get specific attention, so that they get more care for their burial, I assume, as a last gesture.
Okay.
They move on. I think that's what that is.
I read that differently. So again, simply staying with the Hindu tradition, because there are many aspects in India, and I don't want to speak to all of them. Once somebody has died in the house, all lights, lamps, fire, flames are extinguished. Lights not being electric lights, but just light, all flame is extinguished in the house. And one flame is lit outside the house, right outside the house, a small fire is built. So it is, on the one hand, a public acknowledgement somebody has died in the house. So while we now communicate through other means, now the community knows that somebody died in that household. Because there is no flame in the house, there is no cooking in the house that day. So traditionally, the person would have been cremated the very same day, which is just, when you think about it, would have been medically the right thing to do. You didn't want to have people with diseases and death and whatnot in the house. Bodies are not necessarily kept in a morgue. So when my dad, my uncle, and my aunt died, they were all brought home and in a refrigerated cask. that had a glass top on that. And so they would just be in the living room.
Okay, so you could see them. All right,
Yeah.
lovely.
So when I go home, when I would go home to these events, I would just go home. I wouldn't go to a mortuary. I wouldn't go to a um, like a funerary home. I wouldn't go to any one of those. And we would just do the ritual at home, and then. But that day there is no cooking at home.
Okay, yeah.
So everybody in the community would
Bring
just
some
bring
food.
food. They wouldn't even
Take care.
ask you if you need food. They would just come and they would bring food and they would bring coffee and they would bring tea and they would just bring things. So I read that comment in that vein, in that the community took care of those who remained. Um, it might not have been exactly that, but I think that's how I
And
read
that's what we do as well.
it. Mhm.
So when we had the funeral here, people brought food and drink, and I have no idea who brought it what. So, and it's all sorts of things. It's bread,
Yeah,
it's cakes, it's casseroles, it's whatever is needed, so that you don't
right.
we don't have, I mean, there's no prohibition against cooking or flames, but it's the idea is to help you
Hmm.
supply the community. um, Here, luckily in rural Ireland, neighbors will dig the grave with the family. So my kids, my stepchildren and neighbors dug the grave. And
Hmm.
for people like neighbors to be allowed to dig a grave, it's like, oh, thank you, that
Yeah.
it's an honor. Where if you're in a city, you get a digger, and it's very, very
Mhm.
impersonal. Um, so it's I suppose it's having a feast is also an acknowledgement of
Yeah.
the person who is gone as well. It's that um,
It is, yeah, connection back to them in what, not quite a remembrance of sorts.
that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't do this with the others who passed before, like my dad or my uncle or others. But what was interesting, I think we were all, my brothers and I are much older, and my aunt died only a couple of years ago. And when I went there, um, so we had the casket. Um, and she was there, and so we all sat around her, just my brothers and I and my mom and my sister-in-law. We just sat around her and we all told her what we thought about her.
It's lovely.
We never done it before. It's not really part of the culture that I know of. So we sat there, and Loam had recorded a song. You might know this though. It's called the Weaver. So like the three weavers weaving their threads. I don't know the full. I don't know the words to that. But she sang that, so we played that one. And then I talked to her and I told her, come visit whenever you are, whenever you're ready for to do that. Come as often, and um, and come for as long as you feel like you want to. And that's, there is no limitation, there is no, nor is there a need for you to be here with me at any given time. And so you do that, and then you go through the ritual of doing everything else. And so that was really sort of, it was a very intimate send off for her that we were able to give her.
And it's lovely to be able to do things yourself. Pat says, when my family rejected Catholicism, we found ourselves without the ready-made religious practices for the dead. We had to reinvent our own, and it was a wonderfully meaningful thing to do. So I think it's lovely to be able to allow yourself, no matter what tradition you come from,
Hmm.
to do something that may be out of the ordinary, but that has
Hmm.
meaning, rather than stuff being cast in stone. We always do this, and we can't do anything else. And I think it's beautiful to be able to
Hmm.
whatever has a resonance. And I think it's beautiful to be around the coffin, and you can see her because it's a glass lid, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
And then you're able to say, speak to her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, which is kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, where the so much is codified and ritualized in a way that makes it so stringent that it is impersonal. Whereas this, we sort of broke that mold there and we did our own thing, and it was actually initiated by my brothers, not me, and
Wow.
yet it worked magic. So, um, and she does come to me occasionally in my dreams,
Yeah.
and so it is just, that is the beauty of that, of doing things like that.
It's also allowing those who are there to be part of it. When my stepson died, he died, oh God, a long time ago now. I can't remember. 15 years ago. He died suddenly. He was young. And we had a ceremony in a woodland burial in Scotland. So we were all in a circle and we allowed everybody. There were no chief mourners. So everybody, because we're in a circle, it's like we're all here to celebrate. And in the UK, funerals tend to be by invitation or they're very small. In Ireland, you don't get invited to a funeral, you turn up. And so for over there, it was a big funeral. And then people, before the coffin went in, we had a willow coffin for him. People says, I'm sorry, I'm putting things in the coffin. He needs a spoon. He needs a knife. He needs a hip flask. He needs potato cake. He needs something else for him. And people then just came, and somebody had lost her dreadlock and she put it on the coffin. And all of that, watching it, that people needing, I'm saying this to him and speaking to him and saying, you know, Bill, you're going to need this, and I'm giving you this. It was really, really, really moving. And we had the same for Howard. You know, somebody brought him coffee because Howard loved coffee and a few other things. Just that nice, where people want to do one last thing or say, you know.
It is their connection to that person, to the deceased, right? Somebody else may look at it as that is strange. And you may not even like coffee and you may think it's strange, but it is that one-to-one connection that you're putting in there, and that is what is needed. So that is magical. That is magical.
Because I think often, you know, in the modern world, and maybe the same in India, there's stiffness, you know, that people don't, you know, everything is like, well, let's follow protocol and let's behave myself like a good, you know, attendant, rather than being able to say, I'd like to say something, or to have the freedom or the confidence to even say, I want to talk about this person who died, or what they meant to me, or I'd like to say a few words, and to have that open. I think it's just beautiful.
Yeah, it sometimes becomes very almost cold in that people don't allow themselves to expand, you know, just say what needs to be said or what needs to be said in the moment. So
there's another comment from David. I really like the Druid philosophy that once someone drops the body, their essence, soul, spirit continues on, and that we can connect to that person, just like you're talking about your aunt. The relationship continues, and the departed are intimately available to send guidance, love, and rich spiritual gifts. Does this tie in with the Hindu teaching of the Atman?
Yeah. So it is the idea is that people are, without a doubt, again, right, like Druidry, people are born, go through this life, and then they are reborn. So the idea behind this Atman is like, so there's two words, Atman and Brahman, and I get confused between the two of them, which one is which. But one of them is, I think Brahman is sort of the ultimate reality, or the sort of the universal truth, maybe the universal being, the universal truth, and the universe, that which we want to be united with. I think so. That is the word. And so the idea that we can, so the other idea in that sense is like the Atman, I believe, is simply an image has been portrayed, and you are in this sort of the Atman and the your own soul and the universal truth are not truly separate. So you are, while you might be thinking that you are trying to go back and be reunited with it, you're really living in sort of an illusion anymore. You're really right now living in an illusion that is not really true, and you're inseparable already.
So the illusion is one of being of separateness, where it's a bit like it's about bringing to your awareness that the connection is there, or that the oneness is there.
Right. You feel separated while you really are not. But now you need to get enough realization that then allows you to get merged back with the the mothership, I guess. So that is the general principle, I think. So that is the idea behind what they call the Advaita. The Advaita principle stands like undivided or indivisible. So the universal truth and the soul are not two entities. They are really they're together, and that it pervades everything around us. And that is everywhere God is present, everywhere that holiness and that spirituality and the truth is present. So it allows us to, it expands. Now, back to the question that the person asked, that I think David, I think was the person who asked,
Yes.
said, is it the same thing in which you can connect to the other person? So that becomes interesting in this context. Are we all living in our own illusory worlds, and our own microcosm, right? And then how are we connecting? And are we just the idea is that you can connect with your ancestors, which I am saying that I am doing that all the time. Is that reality, or am I fooling myself in that doesn't truly exist? Sorry, the answer is not straightforward, but this is the thing that I sometimes think about, like, what is the idea of fooling myself, or am I believing that I am truly connecting with another soul through its other iterations, through its other journeys that it is part of? I'm sure that's unanswerable, at least for.
And I know within Druidry, it's like, go with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just, no, that's not the question to ask.
Right. Yeah. There are so many times when I wonder why things happen, and I just say, I'm not expected to know the answer to this thing just yet. I just have to go with it. And it's not about life and death, but in general, I think about some of that. Let me make one more comment, and then we can move on too. One of the interesting books that I read was Christopher Hughes'
Yes.
Journey of the Spirit. Journey of the Spirit. Yeah. That also talks about the three words of the OBOD and forget the middle one, and then the
Kegant. Yeah.
And so I look at that and I think about how you could be floating back and forth, and the idea is that you marry up with the final state, which is the Kegant, and that's the. So to me, when I think about that, that is the Atman state or the Brahman state, where you are marrying up with that, right? So I read that recently, and I was like, oh, once again, this is similar ideas, right?
It's just, it's. I know that this is such a limited platform to be able to discussing things, and we'll go into this in depth at some other time. Because I'm fascinated with it. Owen has another question. He says, "Pass by my question, please, if it comes across course. I was wondering, within your cultural and personal framework, how do people speak of the dead? We're very much in line with Irish tradition. Do not speak ill of the dead, but in an additional way, don't lie about them either. Something that leads to a lot of colourful descriptions and statements that strive to be respectful, but don't ignore the shared experience between people, especially if difficult. Are there other nuances?"
No, and certainly not coarse by any means. You definitely don't speak ill of the dead. That does ring true in the same way that you don't speak ill. You just avoid talking about the things that might have been unpleasant with somebody, right? And there's not much talk. I mean, it's almost wistful. So when we talk about, like, my grandfather or my dad or my uncle, for example, right? It is like, oh, I wish they were here and they would have loved this, and then, oh, they would have done so much. And so, imagine if my grandfather was still alive and we were sitting doing this and he was right here and you could talk to him about why wouldn't that have been true? So it's more wistful as much as opposed to not talking ill of them. I don't have terrible relationships with my ancestors to the point where they were unspeakable, and so I don't have. I don't know that I can give any personal indications where I would be like, I just never want to talk about them. because they were so bad or nasty or just rude to me. I don't have that experience to speak to.
It's an interesting one because there's something around being realistic as well. I mean, you have somebody who's an absolute crook, a violent human being, and you go, oh, he was a devoted father and a loving wife, and you kind of go, are you talking about
it? Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, that is so, it's disingenuous and it doesn't help.
Right.
There's that tension between, well, how do you, it's about maybe finding something that was positive and saying, well, they weren't the easiest,
Right.
or talk about their idiosyncrasies at the same time, not in a negative way, but that it's realistic. He was very, very kind, but God, he had a ferocious temper.
Right.
But that you could
couched in better terms.
So that it's not that he was evil or bad, but that actually he did shout and roar.
Mm-hmm.
He was also very kind and decent.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't cross him. Those kind of things that it's more realistic, rather than sugaring it and saying
the false.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's what you meant, Owen. It's yes, I mean, because that thing, don't speak ill of them, but don't lie about them either. And so that, well, I suppose that happens even with the living. It's like,
correct. When we circumvent the reality to speak mildly of somebody, right?
Yeah.
We don't. Yeah.
Now, Sandy here. Now, this is interesting because I've come across this before. She says, I smell my ancestors. If my grandmother is around, I smell rose damask. My father-in-law, I smell his roll-ups, etc. And okay, you just gasped. So what's the rest?
2019, we had to put down one of our cats. She had a cancerous growth, and there would be effusions from there and whatnot, and there was a sickly smell, a sort of a clawing smell there. And then we had to put her down, and then all that happened. But I kept smelling her.
Go away.
I kept selling away her. I thought it was the car and where I would take her to the vet, and didn't. It went away. Months passed. We went to Toronto, and I smelled her there, and we clearly had never been there before, and I smelled her there, and I would smell her for months on end. And I don't know what happened. And then one day, it was just like gone. But I don't smell. I know some people smell other things in relationship to that person, but this happened very clearly with me with that cat. But right around that time, I started gaining a sense of smell whenever we were passing through a cemetery, and I got the same exact smell. It was a sweet smell, and I looked around, and there was actually a funeral party there.
Okay.
Which is different than I think what Sandy said, but I wondered if there was smell that I was smelling that was, I don't know what it was, but I have associated death and smell in some way.
So, okay, so obviously the individual smell with your cat was peculiar to your cat, but then you say you got the similar smell in a graveyard, which normally you don't get that. You don't smell anything.
We were driving. We weren't even walking. We were driving.
So, do you have an extra sense smelling death? And then I think what Sandy is talking about is that, that smell of rose damask is peculiar to her grandmother, and her father-in-law was his roll-ups. And I know that I don't know, people associate with Padre Pio, the Franciscan saint, the smell of violets. I remember a friend of mine, was talking about her aunt, saying, I knew so-and-so was going to die because Padre Pio came in because I could smell the violets in the room. So he was coming to take her or to accompany her.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And Julia says, with my nan, it's the laundry powder she used. But this is really interesting.
That's interesting thoughts.
Because I know people get sounds or hear music or get signs, they find rose petals, in their sitting room, and there are no roses. And that's a sign from their one who's passed on, for example. But it's really interesting with the smells. Wow.
Yeah. I thought I read about that there are people who do smell. Some people hear sounds, like you said. There is an extra sound that they would hear that associates them with a certain set of events. There are smells that people do get, and I have read about it, but I don't remember where anymore.
Yeah.
Um, it is to me, it is that sense of being aware, whichever senses it is, right? It is a sense of being open to the idea. You could get a smell, you could hear a noise sound, or you could see something that didn't exist and ignore it, and just set it aside. But it is also now then taking it, connecting it with something else, right? It is that elevated sense of awareness, allowing yourself that, right?
It's interesting when you were talking about, towards the Atman is getting rid of the illusion of separateness. And then when you increase your awareness,
Uh-huh.
and maybe depending on the relationship you've had with people, that you smell them anyway, but you're not aware of it. It's not until
Mhm.
you tune yourself to it, heighten those senses, whatever the senses are, that then that brings you together. I think it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it's and this is very different, not about the dead or the ancestors, right? If you some people and some of us sometimes can put our hand on a tree, for example, and feel the energy through it. I can't do that with every tree, but I can with some trees.
Yes.
Some of them are very strong, and some of them are very strongly don't touch me. uh, but it is that awareness of that sense of energy that is flowing through it, right? You're not always welcome everywhere, but you're also welcome in some places. And so recognizing that energy is what it is opening your eyes to that particular aspect of life.
And it's all, I mean, I think it's a two-way thing, is that the tree that you
Uh-huh.
have your awareness with is open to you as well, and allowing you, because like you say, you get the sense, no, not from, back off, not from me.
Right.
Just like with people, I mean, we don't
Yes.
enter into the personal space of everybody. It's
Mhm.
with permission and with that connection. Sandy says she's agreeing with what we're talking about, the smell. She says, I smell in other areas also when a spiritual presence is close by. And she
Mm.
also says, yes, on trees. Okay, that's really interesting.
Oh,
Yeah.
it is, yeah. So the energy spaces are different, and it is interesting to see if people hear things to that extent. And to, I've not heard of anybody who hears trees other than the rustling, but the
I
energy.
have. I have heard their song. And it's not the rustling of the trees that the
Uh-huh.
I don't always do it. It's like there've been times going through a woods that I know, and I'm hearing different. It's very nuanced. It's very, very subtle, and different tree species
Mm.
were emitting different sounds. And it's like, so you're walking in the dark. So I like to walk in the dark in the woods, and I hear there are different levels of hearing. So there's the distant traffic. That's one sound. There's the wind in the trees, and
Mhm.
then there's hearing beneath that. There are the sounds of the trees, and I'm not talking about the creaking. I'm talking about different. And I can't sing it. It doesn't. I can't repeat it. But it's that there's a sound they make, and each different tree species make different ones. Now,
Mm.
Alinea says here, my mother used to hear trees during a nice storm. She was kept awake because they were screaming.
Wow.
That is really
That
interesting.
level of awareness is just phenomenal.
Yeah, that's just so it's yeah, and I don't have my awareness all the time, but I just think
Uh-huh.
that's. But I do remember I was there's a place in Killy, County Offaly in the Midlands. There's a place. Um, there are 7 blessed wells in the one area, and it's
Mm.
associated with cure for blindness. So I went there with Howard and my kids. They were very young, and I I heard a tree crying. I was crying, and I knew it wasn't my tears because I had gone there. I was fine. And I had to find the tree. I've never had this since, never had it before. And I had to go, there were trees in the area, and I had to go to each one. It was like, one of you is calling me. One of you is really upset, and I'm feeling your pain. And it was a rowan tree.
Hmm.
So I offered it healing. But I've never had that experience since.
Yeah. What did it need from you?
I offered it energy healing and
Yeah,
love.
I know.
And that was it. It was sad about something, but it was
Hmm.
just either comfort or holding the tree and
Hmm.
sharing whatever healing and love I had with the tree.
Hmm.
Now I've never gone back, so I've passed that lots of times. I'm always in, I'm on my way someplace
One of
else.
these days.
It'd be interesting to go and stop there again and see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we moved to this house, we were living in another rented place, not too far from here, and it had a giant oak tree in the back. And few years ago, we were in 2020, we were thinking of moving out of this region completely somewhere else. And we had gone there and we had done the ritual and we had asked the spirits of that place to welcome us.
Mhm.
We were ambivalent. So we came back and we had a conversation with this oak. We had a small ritual and we had a conversation with this oak. And that was just no, 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 no. You are not going anywhere. I'm that was not the specific words, but it was like, no, this is not done. We are not done. Energy there, and we were left sort of flabbergasted by the whole
And
thing.
you both got that sense independently.
Yeah, both of us went. Both Lom and I went to this place. We did the rituals there, and we got signs that were interesting, and we came back sort of as we had seen these hemlocks there that we talked about early on. We seen the hemlocks and we came back and we talked about the hemlock, and we had built up this tree. We had done all kinds of good things around it and we talked about it, and we broached the subject of moving. It was a rental house. It was never going to be ours. But we had built up a relationship for years with this tree. And we had this conversation, and there was just this like a stop energy.
Wow.
And we went, what just happened here? What do we do with this? And so our house search didn't go anywhere. We didn't go anywhere. We never moved to that other place. None of that stuff materialized. And
Wow.
then when we got this house, I failed to mention this. We have an acreage. We have about 5 acres, and
Oh, lovely.
3 acres of that, 3+ acres of that is woodlands.
Lovely.
Uh, and in the middle of that is a giant oak tree. We estimate through other friends that it might be 300, 350 years old.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So we saw that on the day we even came to see the house. And so we knew that there are two oak trees now that could be connected. And so yeah, so we went back and we did a ritual there at that house, and we explained how we are going there and you can send the energy here. And when we moved to this new house, we brought, I think, like little acorns and some twigs and some leaves from that oak tree in the rental property here, and we put it down here. And I
Brilliant.
think we took some from this place and before we returned everything there, and we think we're building our ley lines. That's my claim, and I'm standing by that. But we wanted the connection between these two oak trees, and then that was not. I mean, like we didn't get that same negative vibe from our previous oak as we did the first time around. It was just astonishing. So what happened there? So, but now around this big tree, we are able to do our rituals and everything. So that's nice. Yeah.
It's beautiful. The number of people here talking about smelling tobacco and they in different places where there's nobody smoking.
Mm.
It's when a tree's been cut down. This is Ava. I can sometimes feel the cries of distress and confusion for months afterwards. Uh, and it's interesting. Uh, you said we're creating ley lines, and you go, well, I don't care what other people think. Well, I was in Peru with my family and in a group of shamanic therapists in 2009, and we were on Machu Picchu.
Uh-huh.
We were working with a shaman there, and two of us of the party were asked to do a journey. So one, Karen, was asked to lie on this particular stone and go up with the condor and come back with a message for the group. And I was to go with my third eye into this little bowl-shaped stone and go down into the earth and come back with a message. So I had no idea what was going to happen and what I was going to come, because I had to go down like the serpent and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the message I got was that we need to work in our own places. And when we move and do a ritual here, go to your place, do a ritual. I have brought my energy. I have created an energy line. And then you're going someplace else. And that wherever we're going in sacred ceremony, we are creating energy pathways. So it may be, if it's appropriate, bringing a stone relief, if that's all right. Some people frown on that, but it may be your song, your voice,
Right.
But that you're bringing that you are. So just interesting that you said that, bringing that connection between those two trees. And I've done it between trees here. And so I have a strong connection with Africa and working with different trees and remembering those trees that I have a connection with. All of that is, if it makes sense and it resonates with you, go for it.
Do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I want to show the viewers something here. This may ring a bell for you as well. We'll see. So I don't know if you can see this.
Okay, I don't know what it's called, but it's the Hindu and the Awan.
The Awan, the Om and the Awan.
Om and the Awan, sorry, the Om and the Awan, yeah.
So do you recognize this? Maybe not. So this is just discs from a cedar tree in our property that was very close to this big tree. Oh, by the way, we call that tree the mother-father tree.
Yeah.
And so I cut these into discs and I brought it with me to UK when I was there right before your...
Oh, yes, I do now, sorry.
You remember that now?
I do, yes. Thank you.
My intent was to leave these discs. I was on a 10-day journey of Wales and different places, and my intent was to leave one behind at different places. That didn't quite come to pass. But then I turned around when we got to Glastonbury, and I turned around and I handed it out to people everywhere. And anybody who would take it, and there was no need that they had to take it. And my intent was, take it. Now you're building a line, but wherever you leave it,
that's
whatever
right.
your intent is, back to our tree. And so now I gave one to Christopher. I gave to some of our friends who are from Germany and other places in the UK and the US, and so now I disperse these things all over as much of the world as I possibly could in that one event. And so the idea is, again, build relationships from all these places to this one location. And if we build up these energy lines, then we are only strengthening this. So
that's right.
Yeah.
And it's lovely, that's a lovely thing to do. And then when we have this online stuff, which is obviously on a different level, that connection as well is very important. And the more we can do it, and then when we can meet physically as well, to continue on all sorts of ways, or that, those wooden discs, that they're there and living all the time. And it's about, you forget about them.
Yeah.
Then you bring it to your awareness and you go, now I'm back in tune again.
Right.
And it's because we get so busy, we forget our connections, and we can't be connected all the time, just everywhere. So it's about being able to tune in when we can, and how powerful that can be.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah. So, just wait a second now. How has Druidry supported you?
Druidry is allowing me to slow down.
Okay.
It is a it forces me to go out. Druidry lies lightly on my shoulders. It is not
Mhm.
a heavy presence in my life where I have to do everything through the ritual alone. It is for me everyday life. I have to live it every given day, right? The way I live it, we live it in our household is to work with the land. That's our connection to the
Mhm.
specific ways of druidry. Do we eat according to the wheel of the year? We try to eat as best as we can off the land. So we try hard not to eat foods that are grown in later fall and winter foods in summer. We try not to. We might end up doing that, but we try not to do that. And if so, if there are things growing in the yard, we go pick them, eat them at that point in time. And so we try to just limit ourselves in that way. So for me, Druidry on a daily basis is sort of reminding me to slow down, get down from the head. My background, my education, and my work is in computer science and data science and in artificial intelligence. So
Uh-huh.
it is all up here, right? You are throbbing through the entire day through there, and I have to find a way to bring myself down and live in the heart at least for a little bit of time. So I'm trying to set aside time first thing in the morning, light lamps. Um, since my trip to the UK and back, I've gotten into tarot readings, and I try to do a little bit of tarot reading every day. I don't do it every day, but I try to do it.
Very
I have
good.
to give a shout out to our dear friend Linda Marson here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was on a tour with her, and she would do the daily tarots, and
Yes, yes.
I really learned how to use the cards. I can't read them without the book yet, but I'm getting there. And so,
Wonderful.
but the idea is set the intention for the day. And it's not about like I want to make so much more money and I want to achieve something. It's about how do I start getting more inner peace? How do I start getting more calm? And how do I do better with something that is bigger, not about the material world. It's about the bigger sense of the word, right? And then I am beginning to look forward to the next turn of the wheel.
Yeah.
I am starting to learn the next turn of the wheel. Before it used to be like, oh, tomorrow is Imol, we need to do something. Or 15 minutes before the ritual, I would be like, oh, what does the ritual look like? So let me read it and then get ready for it. Right. So that is not being present. So it is now that is what it's doing. And as I'm learning these things, and we are sort of then we are taking these rituals and we are sort of customizing it for ourselves, and we are moving it to the way it ought to be for us, not just a broad one works for everyone, right?
Hmm.
One ritual works for everyone. So I promised that I would talk about Beltane, and I think this is an appropriate place to talk
Okay.
very briefly if we can. So the OBOD ritual was, and I think and it's morphed a little bit, was really about the fertility, which it is about Beltane, but it felt very masculine, feminine fertility. And I've heard comments even through like Dave's Druid cast where people were like, well, it leaves out others who are not in the heteronormative cult, society and all that. And so I think they have morphed it to an Awan, Nui word of that. And so we have a small group, three of us. You met the other person, Joe. He was
Yeah.
at the other, and so the three of us get together very often, and we do these rituals as often as we can. And so we came together and said, what if we morph this idea of fertility between flowers and bees? Because we also got ourselves a hive earlier this year, so we have a
Lovely.
hive going on. And so the whole idea of fertility became between not just between male and female fertility, but fertility of the land. And so we were able to bring that, morph that completely around, and bring in the bees and bring in the flowers, which we love to grow and whatnot. And so we assembled an entire ritual around that,
Beautiful.
the three of us, and then we had three other non-OBOD people come together and do a ritual. Bees do a dance to tell other bees where the food
Yeah.
is. So we mimic that dance between two uh, fires.
Beautiful,
And
beautiful.
then that's when we brought in the Hindu prayer of the bee goddess into it, and so we were able to we said that, and so we had all these things going on in there. We blend in the rituals. We try to live the day as best as we can in terms of the wheel, that the location in the wheel of the year that we are at. That's hard, but it's, with practice comes that habit. Um, how do we pause? How do we just? Um, we also do a tarot reading for our wedding for the year to come. We set an
Oh, your
intention,
wedding anniversary time. Okay.
the
Okay.
anniversary time. We do that. We read the previous 2 3 years worth of readings. What was the intention? And then we do a card. We do
Beautiful.
a broad spread, and then we read. We say what it is, and then we set the intention for the next year to come. What does that mean? What do we want the next year to look like? And then we do a reading for that, and we spend good 2.5 3 hours on that every
Wow.
year. So then we try to go back and recollect every quarter what did we say? What did the reading look like? How are we doing? What could be? Um, and so that is how it is not a. I don't have a good altar yet. I'm struggling with what goes in my Druid altar. I have Hindu gods on mine. That's my mom made things and I have them. But I
Lovely.
don't have so. Like I said, the Kaliak is big for me. So what of her should I represent? Um, it can't be just another idol or an image there. That doesn't help. It needs to connect. Um, so it is a light presence, but
Hmm.
we're trying to make it a constant presence.
Okay. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So do you have a daily practice? Do you mix the two or
The daily practice is lighting the lamps, lighting candles in front of the altar,
okay.
allowing myself a half hour to set the intention for the day right now. Uh,
Hmm.
that's the level of the practice at this point. Daily practice. I don't do a meditation. I have tried and I have not done well with meditations
Okay.
yet. Well, it just have. I think
It's not for everybody.
no.
I was talking to somebody the other day and they were talking about, meditation can be difficult. And then something like contemplation and reflection can be just as valuable uh, as, with that notion of focus of meditation, be it a mantra or nothingness or a candle flame or whatever it is that you're focusing on. But that contemplating
Hmm.
um, maybe a triad
Right.
or
Yeah.
something that's in the Gwers, a statement, and and giving that time can be
Right.
really, really fruitful, I think.
I might go out and weed the garden for a
Yes.
while. I might do some things in the garden. And when I'm alone and I'm doing that, I might allow my mind to sort of, I think of it as more as ruminating as opposed to contemplation. A thought might get turned around many, many times. That's the other thing I thought about too, was like, um, so that allows then that it's not about worrying. You're not picking at a problem. You are allowing it to be turned around and let it reveal its answer to you. Those are,
In-
and I've done that on different things, and I have found insights that are great. So when we think of the avan, right, it's a sound. While we only say it 3 times in our rituals, and I wonder why we should ever stop there. Sometimes I think about saying it.
in Glastonbury at the gatherers we do 9. Often it's 9. But yes, I mean you're not limited to 3.
Not limited, right? So the same sound om,
Yeah.
which is what I showed you here earlier, right? Which is om is also a sound that is allowed that you can say it infinite times. But the idea is that you're letting that sound, whether it's the avan or the om, reverberate through your body. You're allowing it to flow through your body and it reverberates, and it really does reverberate, right? Your body
Yeah.
moves with that specific sound. Then you're allowing that sound sort of fades into the background, and then you let other thoughts go through you. then you allow, you know, you allow yourself to think through the other things that, the spiritual aspects of life. So that's another set of things that I sometimes try to do. I don't utter the avan or the om regularly, but I allow myself to sort of ruminate over things that are, not worry about them, but think about good things. What would this mean? When you came and asked me, I was very doubtful about whether I wanted to talk to you or not. But then I said, no, I must. And I took the time since Glastonbury to now, which was early June to early October now. And this is one of those things that I have been ruminating over. Like, what does it mean for me to be a druid? Am I a druid? Am I even a true druid? Am I? So I allowed that thought to just flow through me repeatedly and say, I am what I am. That's then you allowed me to set myself in that space. Um,
It's an interesting one. Some people say, well, I don't call myself a druid because I don't feel I am one, or I'm uncomfortable with it, or I'm not ready yet to call myself a druid. And I always remember Kathleen Matthews at the 50th anniversary. She gave a talk in Glastonbury, and she ended her talk. Her last statement was, so if somebody says to you, so you call yourself a druid, do you? You say, no, I don't call myself a druid. I am a druid. And you said I'm, a true druid, a real druid. I don't know what a true druid or a real druid is. And it's about being, I know I'm a druid. I can't tell you why. Am I good one? Well, am I a good person? Am I good whatever I am? I don't know. That's not the issue. Does my druidry have a relevance and a resonance for my life? Does it give me the support I need? Do I feel okay with being one? Not just calling myself, but being one. Yeah, it feels right. Only I can say that for me, and only you can say it for you.
Yeah.
Sandy says, I'm so pleased you agreed to chat with Eimear.
Thank you, Sandy.
And Julie says, I think it's important to reassess your beliefs from time to time, or constantly in my case, she says. But I think we always need to do that things evolve. And if we get stuck in, then we become fundamentalist or whatever. That it's important to be able to, and I think druidry allows this because it's very organic. So we don't know how our druidic ancestors practiced. We have hints and glimpses, but we don't have ancient rites, rituals, or good books or anything like that. And it's evolving to have a relevance for this time and a resonance. And it certainly does, born by, we have over 30,000 members.
Oh, you have many years of conversations coming.
Absolutely. So, and it seems to be growing, and it's like that. Its time has come, and I think maybe, the last 2 years, the world we were living in, climate change, all of that, and also it's such a break from fundamentalism, from totalitarianism. It's around, you bring who you are in to your druidry, and you allow both, and that's what it is. And I think that's what calls people, is that here's a place where you can be that and bring with you. You don't have to reject your past.
Right. It's not a clean break. It's not a clean break at all.
And it's a weaving. You mentioned that song. You weave in your previous experience, your previous values, all of those, and you create the tapestry. Yeah. So it's either more or less, and it's up to you.
Right.
So anyway, Ferdiad, I don't know if you know Ferdiad. This has been a wonderful chat, one of my favorites, of which there are many. And Owen says, this has been such a wonderful exploration. Long may it journey. And then Aaron says, I feel him as a druid, but I couldn't define it.
Thank you all. It's wonderful. These are such wonderful conversations, because I'm going back and listening to the past ones, and it's such a variety of ideas that people are bringing. outside of the Guernsey and the OBOD itself, right? So it is so enriching to hear people speak of these things. And I just let it run, right? I make dinner or I do something and I just let it run. There's not a lot to see, so you can just listen to it.
That's right.
I think it's wonderful to be able to listen to these things and just absorb. In addition to Dave's Druidcast and other things, this is a whole other flavor.
I feel so privileged to be able to chat to people, and I get to know people. I mean, I met you once online and then spoke to you in Glastonbury.
Yeah.
And now I have a greater sense of who you are through this 2-hour conversation. So it's just, I get it. And even people I've known over the years, and then I invite them on. It's like, I didn't know that about you. Oh, right. This is really interesting. I now have another sense. So it's, Andrew says, this has been a great fireside chat. And Ferdy says, Eimear's going to talk to every last one of us. That's why I do it every week. Well, nearly every week. But I really, really enjoy it. And it's interesting to come back, who you are. Rosemary says, sometimes we let others' perception of who we are sink deep into our minds and we begin to doubt who we are. And I think that it's very important that we step into our own place and our own space as Druids and come to terms with that. And I think sometimes it might be useful to stand, in front of the mirror every day, stand and say, I, Eimear Burke, am a Druid.
Yeah. Don't let others influence you into what Druid ought to be like. Right?
Exactly.
It's so easy to let others influence you. And that
you don't need a beard, but you do need red lipstick. So.
Oh.
Aaron says there's definitely something about, this is interesting, about the way a Druid speaks that is so hypnotic and enriching. The time flies listening. Thank you very much. It does, actually. I mean, we've gone over 2 hours now. And Verdia says, I'm reminded of the quote about something else entirely. I'll know it when I see it. And that's it. There's something about, I'm looking for something. What is it? I don't know, but I'll know it when I see it. And then there's that instant recognition. That's it.
Right.
And often I work that way, operate that. It's like.
But it comes with practice, though.
Yeah.
It is not about imagining that it'll happen. It comes with practice. One has to practice and try to make it as much as possible, as often as possible. And
Flame says, or Flame Red 24, there's a great name. A Druid is how you live. So, and Julie says, Julie's a regular. This has been such a fascinating chat. So much of your ancestors, or sorry, not your ancestors. Oh, there's a slip. So much of your ancestors. No, I've said it again. Okay. So much of your answers.
Answers, yeah.
So much of your ancestors, I've done it, answers have resonated with me, which has helped me put my beliefs into words. Okay. Ferdy has given me advice. Look up the context of the quote; it'll give you a giggle. Okay, I can I can only imagine what that might be, Ferdy. Anyway,
I have a question for you before you leave. A more technical question, that is. When I go back and listen to the previous chats, I don't get to see the things that people type in on the side.
Do you look at it on YouTube or Facebook?
YouTube. So I don't know what is going on. So because there is just so much more wealth in the conversation that is happening behind the scenes.
And I don't know what we can do about that. And I don't know if you can go in on the OBOD Facebook page and see them that way.
Okay. I might look at it.
I think you can see the comments, because the people who are commenting, they're both on YouTube. They could be on the OBOD YouTube, they could be on mine, it could be on Philip's. So
okay.
If you're saying, I don't know which.
I go to yours. So
okay, and there should be comment. Maybe they don't. I don't understand. Okay.
Something to keep in mind, that's all.
Yeah.
Because there is so much wealth in the other comments that are being made and the questions being asked.
I know in if you have a Zoom, you can save the chat. I don't think we have an option for that yet. Anyway, but I must look at that. Okay, so ancestors, a loud hint for you, Eimear. Thank you, Owen. Yes. The ancestors have the answers for me. Facebook shows the comments. That's what Owen is saying.
Okay.
Facebook keeps it all up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, and again, but you'll only see the Facebook comments. You won't see the YouTube comments. See, some people come on.
I see it one or the other.
Because not everybody's on Facebook.
Right.
So it's interesting what you and your ancestors and what the colleague says, no, they've told you, and now my ancestors bit coming up. I need to have a look at that. Okay, thank you, Owen, for the reminder. And of course, we're at the end of this month are coming, we will be heading into Sound, so it's a lot to think about. Srini, it's just been so lovely having you on, and absolutely just a joy to talk to you. So I'm going to send you backstage, and you and I will go over some of the comments. So don't go away, and you'll be able to go in to
I
Facebook.
do see it here.
Yeah. So you say goodbye to everybody, and then you just go through the veil, and then I'll say goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. This has been most wonderful. I love the questions. I'm going to try and see if I can get a hold of all of them, and maybe we can connect up on Facebook and chat online as well. So thank you very much, and blessed be.
Okay, so I'll see you in a few minutes. Well, I'll just do that. So thank you all so much and for your comments, and I look forward to seeing you next week for another chat with another guest. And so enjoy the rest of your evening, day, afternoon, whatever it is. It's just so lovely to see your comments, and I really appreciate it, because you also contribute so much to these conversations. So in the meantime, have a good, space between equinox and Samhain, and may your harvest continue to be rich. And till I see you next week, Slán go fóill.